I never thought much about being 37 and single until Jake asked me about it. New guy, first week on the factory floor, still had that fresh eagerness that hadn't been ground down by the monotony of the assembly line yet. We were on lunch break, sitting on the loading dock with our legs dangling over the edge, and he just came out with it. "So why aren't you married, man?" Direct, no filter. The other guys looked up from their sandwiches, suddenly interested. I shrugged, took a bite of my turkey club, and said, "No reason." And Jake smiled, not a mocking smile, not a knowing smile, something else, something that made my chest feel tight. The truth is, there were 1,000 reasons. I could have told him about Sarah, who I almost proposed to when I was 25, before she took that job in Seattle, and I couldn't leave my mom, who was sick at the time. I could have mentioned the string of relationships that fizzled out because I worked overtime too much, or didn't make enough, or wasn't ambitious enough, or was too set in my ways. I could have explained how, after a while, you just get comfortable being alone. How your apartment becomes exactly the way you want it. How you don't have to negotiate what to watch on TV, or explain why you need an hour of silence after a 10-hour shift. But I didn't say any of that. I just said no reason, and Jake smiled, and something shifted. He kept sitting with me at lunch after that. The other guys, they rotated. Sometimes it was Carlos and Pete. Sometimes Big Mike joined us. Sometimes it was just whoever was nearby. But Jake always made a point of finding me. He'd bring an extra coffee sometimes, the good stuff from that place on Morrison Street, not the burnt sludge from the break room. "Figured you could use a real cup," he'd say, handing it over like it was nothing. Like it didn't make my day every single time. Jake was different from most guys who came through the factory. He was 32, had worked construction before this, had a degree in something he never finished, had lived in 3 different states. He talked about things, not just sports and weekend plans, but actual things. Books he was reading, podcasts he'd listened to, ideas he was chewing on. One day he asked me if I thought people were basically good or basically selfish, just like that. Out of nowhere, while we were both staring at the parking lot. "Depends on the day," I said. "Yeah," he agreed, nodding slowly. "Yeah, that's probably right." I started looking forward to lunch in a way I hadn't in years. Started getting to work a few minutes early, just in case Jake was early too. Started bringing better food, stuff I actually wanted to eat instead of whatever was quickest. Started caring about things I'd stopped caring about. Like whether my shirt was wrinkled, like whether I'd shaved that morning. Small things that felt big. 3 weeks in, Jake invited me to grab a beer after work. Just casual, thrown out there while we were clocking out. "There's a place near my apartment, decent wings, cheap beer. You interested?" And I should have said no. I should have stuck to my routine, gone home, microwaved something, watched whatever was on, gone to bed. But I heard myself saying, "Yeah, sure, that sounds good." The place was called Murphy's, a dive bar with sticky floors and a jukebox that only played songs from before 1995. We grabbed a booth in the back, ordered a pitcher, and suddenly I couldn't remember how to have a conversation. All those easy talks at lunch disappeared. I was too aware of everything. The way Jake's fingers drummed on the table. The way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. The way he leaned in when he talked, like what I was saying actually mattered. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked after the second beer. "The factory, I mean, doing something different." "Every day," I admitted. "But then I think about health insurance and retirement and the fact that I've been there 14 years and I'm vested in the pension plan, and it seems stupid to start over." "Yeah, but what if you only get one life?" Jake said, and the way he looked at me made my throat tight. "What if this is it, and you spend it doing something that's just okay because it's safe?" "What's wrong with safe?" I asked, but it came out defensive. "Nothing," Jake said quickly. "Nothing's wrong with it. I just wonder sometimes if safe is the same as happy." We finished the pitcher, ordered another, started talking about real things, about his divorce 2 years ago, quick and clean, no kids, just two people who realized they'd made a mistake, about my mom's death 5 years back, how the grief still hit me sometimes in the produce aisle when I saw her favorite apples, about loneliness and fear and all those things men aren't supposed to talk about, but somehow we were. "Can I tell you something?" Jake said around midnight, and the bar was nearly empty by then. "That day I asked why you weren't married, and you said no reason. I knew right then." "Knew what?" My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "That we were the same," he said simply, "that you'd been hiding too." The world tilted. Everything I'd been carefully not thinking about, not acknowledging, not letting myself feel, suddenly came rushing forward. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. "I'm not trying to make this weird," Jake continued, his voice soft but steady. I spent so long pretending, being married to someone I cared about but didn't love. Not really. Not the way you're supposed to. And when I finally admitted the truth to myself, it was like I could breathe for the first time. But it's lonely, you know? Being honest, but alone. "Yeah," I managed. "I know." We didn't talk much after that, just sat there, the silence comfortable and terrifying at the same time. When we finally left, Jake walked me to my truck, even though his car was in the other direction. We stood there in the parking lot, streetlight buzzing overhead, and I knew this was a moment. One of those moments that changes everything or changes nothing, depending on what you do next. "Same time tomorrow?" Jake asked. "Lunch, I mean." "Yeah," I said. "Same time." He smiled, that same smile from the first day, and walked away. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes before I could make myself drive home. Work became different after that. Not worse, not better, just different. Every interaction with Jake felt charged with meaning. When he handed me a wrench, our fingers would touch and I'd feel it all day. When he laughed at something I said, I'd replay it in my head during the drive home. When he showed up Monday morning with a black eye and a split lip, I felt physically sick. "What happened?" I asked, pulling him aside before shift started. "Went to a different bar this weekend," he said, trying to joke. "Apparently picked the wrong one to be myself in." The rage that went through me was white hot and immediate. "Who did this?" "Doesn't matter, I'm fine." But his hands were shaking when he clocked in. I couldn't focus all morning, kept making mistakes, had to redo a whole section because I wasn't paying attention. At lunch, Jake didn't show up at our usual spot. I found him in his car, windows up, just sitting there. I knocked on the glass. He looked up, and the expression on his face broke something in me. I opened the door, slid into the passenger seat, and we sat there, not talking for 5 minutes. "I'm tired," Jake finally said. "I'm so tired of being afraid." "Me too," I whispered. "I think about you all the time," he said, staring straight ahead. "I know I shouldn't. I know it complicates everything, but I can't help it. Every morning I wake up and think about seeing you. Every night I go to sleep thinking about what you said that day, how you smiled, what it would be like if I could just—" He stopped, shook his head. "I'm sorry, this isn't fair to you." "What if I think about you too?" I said, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears. "What if I've been thinking about you since that first day and I'm just as scared as you are?" He turned to look at me then, really look at me, and I saw everything I was feeling reflected back. Hope and terror and longing and fear all mixed together. "What do we do?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. I've never done this, never let myself." "Me neither," Jake said. "Not really, not honestly." We sat there in his car while our lunch break ticked away, neither of us moving, both of us terrified and exhilarated. Finally, slowly, Jake reached across the center console and took my hand. just held it, his palm warm and rough against mine. 14 years I'd worked at that factory. 14 years of routine and safety and carefully maintained distance from anything that might hurt me. And in 1 second, holding Jake's hand in the front seat of his beat-up Honda, all of that fell away. "We'll figure it out," I said. "Yeah? Yeah." We went back to work late, didn't care about the looks we got. That night, Jake came over to my apartment for the first time. We ordered pizza, watched a movie neither of us paid attention to, talked until 3 in the morning. He fell asleep on my couch and I covered him with a blanket and stood there watching him breathe, thinking about how lonely I'd been without even realizing it. How I'd convinced myself that safe was enough, that comfortable was the same as content. The next morning I woke up to the smell of coffee. Jake was in my kitchen, had figured out my ancient coffee maker, was scrambling eggs like he belonged there. "Hope this is okay," he said when he saw me. "I'm not great at mornings, but I'm decent at breakfast." "It's perfect," I said, and meant it. We didn't rush anything, didn't put labels on it or make announcements. We just started existing together. Jake started keeping a toothbrush at my place. I started keeping spare clothes at his. We still sat together at lunch, but now the guys knew something had shifted. Carlos figured it out first, pulled me aside one day and said, "Good for you, man. Seriously, life's too short." Big Mike took longer, but when he got it, he just nodded and said, "Jake's good people." There were hard moments. A guy on second shift made a comment, and I had to walk away before I did something stupid. Jake's ex-wife called one night, drunk and crying, saying she always knew, and Jake spent an hour on the phone with her, patient and kind even though she was falling apart. My sister came to visit and didn't understand. Said things like, "Are you sure?" and "What will people think?" And I had to explain that I'd spent 37 years worrying about what people thought and I was done. But there were good moments too. So many good moments. Jake teaching me to cook actual meals instead of microwaving everything. Me teaching him to fish at the lake where my dad used to take me. Both of us learning how to be vulnerable, how to need someone, how to let someone need us. The first time Jake said he loved me, we were doing dishes after dinner, something completely mundane, and it just came out. "I love you, you know that?" And I dropped the plate I was washing, had to clean up broken ceramic, but I was smiling so hard my face hurt. "I love you too," I said, and it was the truest thing I'd ever spoken. 6 months after that first lunch break conversation, we were sitting on my couch on a Sunday morning, drinking coffee and reading different sections of the newspaper when Jake said, "Move in with me." "I thought you basically already lived here," I joked. "I'm serious. Let's get a place together. Something that's ours, not yours or mine." I looked around my apartment, this space I'd lived in alone for 8 years, where everything was exactly how I wanted it because I never had to compromise with anyone. And I thought about how empty it had been, how I'd filled it with stuff instead of life, how I'd chosen safe over happy for so long I'd forgotten there was a difference. "Okay," I said, "let's do it." We found a small house on the east side of town, nothing fancy, but it had a garage for Jake's tools and a backyard where we could put a grill. Moving day, the guys from work showed up without being asked. Carlos brought his truck, Big Mike brought muscle, Pete brought beer. We hauled boxes and furniture, assembled a bed frame, argued about where the couch should go. And when it was done, when everyone had left and it was just me and Jake, standing in our living room surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt home. "No reason, huh?" Jake said, grinning at me. "That's what you told me. No reason you weren't married." "I was waiting," I said, pulling him close. "I just didn't know it yet." "Waiting for what?" "For someone to ask the right question. For someone to see the real answer." I kissed him, soft and slow. "For you." That was 2 years ago. We still work at the factory, still eat lunch on the loading dock, still get looks sometimes from people who don't understand. But we also have Sunday morning coffee and crossword puzzles. We have inside jokes and shared memories and plans for the future. We have arguments about whose turn it is to take out the trash and negotiations about what to have for dinner. We have normal, boring, beautiful life together. Last week, a new guy started on the line. Young kid, maybe 23, eager and nervous. At lunch, he sat near us, and I saw him watching, trying to figure out the dynamic. Finally, he worked up the courage to ask, "You guys roommates or something?" Jake and I looked at each other and smiled. "Or something," Jake said easily, and I realized that's all it takes. Someone brave enough to ask a question, someone honest enough to give a real answer, someone willing to smile when the truth is scary and uncertain and completely worth it. I spent so many years hiding behind no reason, protecting myself from the possibility of pain. But pain and joy, they come together. You can't have one without risking the other, and I'd rather risk everything with Jake than play it safe alone. So yeah, there was no reason I wasn't married, no reason except fear, and fear, it turns out, is a terrible reason to miss out on love. Total_char_count, 16,247.